How certain are we of the nature of reality? How can we be so certain that humanity's generally accepted view of the world is concrete and objective? The story you're about to hear will force you to question these assumptions. It will cause you to question just how much we truly know about the world, this universe, and the very nature of time and space. Perhaps there is more than meets the eye, more than this dimension would like for the general population to know. Today we will be listening to one woman's experience when this veil appears to have been lifted, if only for a short moment. I encourage you to grab a snack, get comfortable, and shut the blinds. Here we go. This happened back in the fall of 2004. I remember because this happened during my first year in New York City. I lived there for a few years while I was attending Columbia University. The college is pretty far uptown on the west side of Manhattan, and for that reason, I chose to get my apartment uptown as well. That way it was only a short walk to get to school. Maybe around 15 minutes from my apartment on 103rd Street. I'm only mentioning this to point out that, for the most part, I wasn't too familiar with the public transit system. I mean, I knew how to use the subway and everything, but I wasn't too keen on what was normal and what wasn't. One of my friends at the time lived in Brooklyn, and our little friend group used to hang out at her house and throw little parties or whatever. Point is, to get there, I'd take the subway all the way down to the Essex Street subway station, where I'd make a transfer to a different subway line before crossing over the bridge into Brooklyn. So, it was fairly late one night, maybe around 1 in the morning, and I was on my way home from her apartment. I had just gotten off the bridge, and now I was making that transfer to head back uptown to my apartment. Because I had been down to see her so often, I had been in this subway station quite a few times, and every single time that I passed through here, I would notice this massive, empty area just across the tracks of the JM platform. I always wondered what it was. There seemed to be a lot of old infrastructure back there, maybe some machines and stuff, but I couldn't see any reason for there to be this huge space. No workers were ever back there, no subway car storage, no nothing. Just supporting beams for what seemed like miles up and down. For the most part, it was completely dark, except for some small incandescent lights spread around just enough to see little rats scurry around through puddles of God knows what. I sat on the bench for a while waiting for my train before a woman came over that horrible PA system they have down there. I could barely make out that my train was going to be delayed for another 15 to 20 minutes, which almost never happens. I kinda glanced around and saw that there was pretty much nobody else in the station besides maybe 1 or 2 people far down on another platform. Anyways, I guess the train delay, plus the fact that nobody was looking, mixed with the glass or 2 of wine in me, made me decide to go check out whatever the hell was in this huge area across the tracks. Looking back, this was extremely stupid. I didn't even know about that electric third rail. If I'd happened to accidentally touch that, I would have literally been fried, but I didn't, so lucky me, I guess. After you cross the track, there's this little retention wall you have to climb over too, so I went over that and I found myself in the strangest area of the city I've ever been in. It was exceedingly dark. Again, there were only a few dim yellow lights hanging around the area to light up the way, but other than that, it was pitch black. I remember walking around, understandably on my toes, but also fascinated with the area. The more I looked around, the more questions I had. Very quickly, I noticed a pair of tracks on the ground that sort of looped all around the room. They looked very old though, and it was clear that it had been a very long time since they were used. Next, I noticed something odd about the ceiling. Directly above the loops of track, there were these rails, I guess. I don't know how to explain them, but they were fixed to the ceiling. I'd later realize exactly what these were, but at the time, I had no idea. It was all very interesting though. I continued to look around the area in an attempt to figure out what the strange area is, or was, used for. I noticed several MTA workers come down the stairs and onto the subway platform where I had originally come from, so I backed deeper into the room where I could hide in the shadows. I wasn't too worried about these guys. Worst case, they'd just kick me back onto the street. It's not like you can ban someone from a citywide subway system. Now that I was in the dark, I kept tripping over all the shit on the ground while my eyes adjusted. There was a lot of junk back there, probably from homeless people seeking shelter. The place looked like it hadn't been painted in 100 years, and, in all honesty, that probably wasn't too far off from the truth. The steel support beams were all rusted, too. The floor was really wet as well for some reason. I couldn't tell if it was from the rain outside, or if it was something leaking in from the sewage system. I figured it was best not to think about it too much. It was honestly gross as hell in there. Writing this all down now, I know it sounds kind of strange that I would have even wanted to go back there, but I don't know, the mystery of the area drew me in. I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff. Eventually, I had wandered so deep that I couldn't see anything. I must have stumbled into some kind of an old tunnel or something. I started kind of freaking out because after rounding a corner, I had completely lost my sense of direction. I pulled out my old Verizon flip phone and flicked on the shitty little flashlight on the back. It didn't help much. I vividly remember how dusty it had gotten back there, and the little amount of light that my phone did produce just reflected off the dust, making it really hard to see. It was better than total darkness though, so I kept it on. I don't know exactly how long I was in that tunnel, but there must have been at least 5 minutes of me freaking out about to piss my pants trying to get out of there. I started to worry that I had wandered into an active subway tunnel or something, which wasn't a fun thought. To make matters worse, the phone flashlight just cut off. It almost seemed to burn out. It suddenly kind of shifted to a reddish orange before fading out completely. I tried to get it to turn back on, but I realized my entire phone was broken. The screen only displayed this thin white line through the bottom half of the screen, and nothing I did could get it to work again. I couldn't even turn the phone off. I tried popping the battery out and putting it back in, but it would just keep displaying that strange line. I kept the phone after this strange experience, and to this day, that's all that ever displays when I try turning it on. I continued through the tunnel in complete darkness. I couldn't even see my own hands in front of me. I eventually found a wall and followed along it with my hand until I happened to spot a door with a tiny bit of light leaking from underneath. I was running out of options at that point, and I needed to get the hell out of there before I lost my shit, so I pulled it open, hoping maybe it was an old emergency stairwell up to street level. However, what I found inside was not what I expected. It was an office with 2 people inside. One man sat at a desk, and the other leaned over the desk next to him, looking at some document with him. They both kind of jumped as I opened the door. I couldn't put my finger on it at the time, but something about them was off, almost funny looking. We both seemed to be off-put by each other. The man sitting at the desk was the first to speak. I don't remember exactly how that conversation went because this was such a long time ago now, but he was very nice and had a kind of funny accent. He said something like, "You lost, or can I help you with something?" And I said something like, "No, I'm just lost. I wandered down here into the tunnel and, I don't know, I couldn't find my way out." "What were you doing all the way down here?" "I don't know, I got curious. Sorry, I know I shouldn't be down here. I won't come back, but how do I get out of here?" They both were kind of staring at me now, with the same strange look on their faces that I couldn't quite decipher. "Sure," the guy at the desk said. He kind of nudged the man standing up before saying something like, "Don't do that again, though. I'm not sure what was going through your head, but this tunnel takes the streetcars up across the Williamsburg. It's not a playground. A young girl like you could get hurt down here." Streetcar? I didn't know cars passed down here. Maybe I wandered into some tunnel that led cars up onto the bridge? That didn't make any sense, though. Why would the cars go underground before heading back up and onto the bridge? This was the first sign of things starting to not make much sense. It only got more strange from there. I don't remember what else we said, if anything, but the man leaning against the desk grabbed his black blazer, hat, and a flashlight before we both walked out into the tunnel. We walked and talked through the darkness. Again, I'm paraphrasing our conversation, but it went something like this. "So, did you sneak all the way down here, or did you at least pay the fare?" "Oh no, I swiped in," I responded. "Swiped in?" he asked, sounding confused. "Yeah, I swiped at the turnstile." "So you did pay?" "Yeah," I said, sort of irritated. Now, that interaction confused me at the time. By 2004, New York City had just finished phasing in the new Metro cards, which were introduced in 1993. To get into the subway system, you'd have to swipe the card at the turnstile to get inside. This is obvious to anyone who's familiar with the city. At first, I thought maybe he just didn't hear me right, but those words would ring in my head almost every single day from then on. You'll see why in a moment. Neither of us said much else. I think we both felt weirded out by each other, so we just kept our mouths shut as we approached a much brighter section of the tunnel. Here's where things really start to get confusing. I honestly still don't know what to make of this. As we head back into what I thought was the same area I entered from the tunnel, I noticed that, well, it wasn't the same area. It was similar, but definitely not the same spot. This section of the subway was much cleaner. There were no more wet puddles on the floor, much less dust. The steel supports were all nicely maintained and painted with very little visible rust. Even the ceilings had this sort of rib design. It was very nice, the nicest part of the subway system I had ever been in, which again wasn't exactly saying much because I had only been to a handful of stations by this point. What was weird though was the layout of this area was exactly the same as the last one. I quickly realized that it had the same looping tracks on the floor, the same strange rail above said tracks, and I could still hear the subway trains from somewhere nearby, although I couldn't see them. This section was much busier, and it wasn't abandoned like the other one. There were plenty of workers, all wearing the same black blazer and hat as the man who was walking with me. There were lots of other passengers too, all in a big group waiting for this strange vehicle that was looping around on the tracks. Well, alright, where are you headed? Are you taking one of the streetcars back into Brooklyn? If you are, there's the Tompkins Ave tram right there. If you run, you can catch it. Oh, no thanks, I'm headed uptown. I'll make it okay, thanks for the help. With a nod, the man walked off. Now I was even more fascinated. Everything about this new area was throwing me off. I didn't even really know what a tram or a trolley was at the time. I mean, I knew what they were, but I had never really seen one in person, especially not in New York City. I didn't even know that they had these. I watched as maybe 20 or 30 people all crammed onto the Brooklyn-bound trolley. All sorts of strange-looking people, professional-looking men and women all climbed inside. After a few minutes, I thought I had figured out what was going on. Flashback to the year prior, sometime during the holidays, me and one of my guy friends at the time heard that the subway was going to bring out one of its old antique cars from the 30s to let people ride in again. It was complete with all kinds of old authentic ads from the time period, and other holiday decorations on the outside. Although we didn't, plenty of people got all dressed up in suits and old clothes, and even did their hair and makeup the way they would have back in the 30s. So I concluded that the whole thing was some kind of a reenactment. That seemed to make a lot of sense. That would explain this antique-looking trolley and why everyone was all dressed up the way they were. I even saw a few people smoking inside, guys and girls. I kind of laughed to myself. Everyone was taking it way too seriously. The guys with their top hats and newspapers, and the girls with their cherry red makeup. Still, it was interesting to see the old cars. Even the workers seemed to be in on the act, being all dressed up with their hats and blazers. Usually they just have those bright green or orange MTA work vests on. They were blowing their whistles and everything, the whole shebang. I mean, the more I looked around, the more intricate I saw the whole thing was. The signs even seemed to be period accurate. One said something about not tossing cigars out the windows from the bridge. Others talked about the 5-cent fare, which is just a joke nowadays. I sort of aimlessly walked around trying to find the exit while still trying to take in this strange place and admiring the trolleys as they came down the tracks from the dark tunnel and looped around. I couldn't believe how many people had come out dressed up in these old clothes. The whole thing seemed to take a lot of effort. I was down there for quite a while, still unable to find the exit. I was getting all these strange looks from people too. I figured it was just because I was ruining the immersion of the reenactment or whatever, so I just kept awkwardly holding my hand up to apologize and turning my head away. Right around then, I kind of got hit with a wave of realization. Why is this happening at, like, 1:30 a.m.? I started to question myself after that. No, just a few moments ago I was waiting on the JM platform heading from Brooklyn. I couldn't have been in here for any longer than, like, 30 minutes by that point. I was sure of it. Still, I knew that I did have a glass or two of wine, and I figured maybe I had lost count of my drinks or something. By that point, it was starting to feel like I was living in some sort of a strange fever dream. Where even was I? What the fuck is going on? I felt like I used to when I was a little kid, pacing down the aisles of the grocery store trying to find my mom, worrying with every passing second that maybe she had left without me. I started to feel kind of hot, so I pulled my jacket off and sat down on a bench, watching this crazy scene play out in front of me. I knew I could just hop on one of these trolleys, but I felt so out of place. Everyone was looking at me like I didn't belong, like I was transparent. They seemed to be able to see right through me, right to my core. It was like they could feel how lost and vulnerable I was, how confused I was. I began to feel scared. There was this strange sense of vertigo-inducing doom that I could feel in my stomach. The same feeling you might get when you wake up to a bump in the night, unsure if the sound had truly ever existed, or if you had simply made it up in your own mind. A sick prank played onto the conscious mind by the subconscious little brother. I had to get out. In a flash, I shot up from my seat and sped back into the tunnel. This was the only way I knew how to get back to where I'd come from. Back to that strange empty room, back across the tracks, back home. The darkness engulfed me the deeper and deeper I went inside the tunnel. The suffocating thick dust slowly returned. My brisk walk eventually turned into a jog, not wanting to go so fast as to run into a wall. Then, a full-on sprint through the deep black void. I went deeper and deeper. The world in front of me and the world behind my eyelids merged into one. The darkness had completely robbed me of my vision, so I kept my eyelids shut as I ran to keep the dust out. I started screaming, yelling. I needed something, anything, anyone. I needed to get out. I tripped on a loose 2x4 and landed in a puddle. I was back. That experience has haunted me to my bones to this day. Not even necessarily because of what happened, but because of what I learned when I got home and did some research online. That area was real. New York City did have a trolley terminal at Essex Street, and those streetcars did cross over the Williamsburg Bridge. That is, until 1948, when the terminal was permanently shut down. Now, what does this all mean? What are we to gather from an experience like this? Some, of course, will refute the account. Others will believe her. Perhaps this was exactly the intention of the universe, to reveal itself in a nature which was so incredible that the experience could only be truly understood by its intended recipient.